Aaron, a self-made millionaire, always led with respect and humility. But during a high-profile investor meeting, a prejudiced CEO refuses to shake his hand, unaware that Aaron is the largest investor in the room. What happens next is more shocking than anyone could imagine. With Monique by his side, Aaron's quiet strength triggers a wave of change that shakes the entire company. Why did such a simple gesture of disrespect lead to dramatic consequences? How did Aaron's dignified response uncover hidden biases and spark a wave of change in the corporate world? Stay tuned to find out. And before we dive in, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if this story of resilience and justice resonates with you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The sleek conference room on the top floor of Bradford Industries buzzed with anticipation. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the polished oak table where board members sat, their eyes fixed on the man at the head of the table. Mr. Jonathan Bradford, CEO of the prestigious company, exuded an air of authority as he adjusted his crisp navy suit and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying a hint of southern drawl, "I appreciate you all being here today. We got some important matters to discuss regarding our company's future." As Bradford spoke, his gaze swept across the room, lingering on the faces of his white, affluent board members. When his eyes fell upon Maria Rodriguez, one of the few people of color present, his expression subtly hardened. "Now, I understand some of you have concerns about our current direction," Bradford continued. "Ms. Rodriguez, I believe you wanted to present an idea about diversifying our supplier base?" Maria nodded eagerly, straightening in her chair. "Yes, Mr. Bradford. I've done extensive research on—" "I'm sure you have," Bradford interrupted, his tone dismissive. "But I think we need to focus on more pressing issues. Mr. Thompson, didn't you have some thoughts on expanding our luxury product line?" As the meeting progressed, it became clear that Bradford consistently favored ideas from his wealthy, white investors while brushing aside suggestions from employees of color. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable, setting the tone for the company's culture under his leadership. Meanwhile, across town in a modest apartment, Aaron Johnson sat at his kitchen table, poring over financial reports. His wife, Monique, placed a steaming mug of coffee beside him and squeezed his shoulder. "Still working, honey?" she asked, her voice warm with concern. Aaron looked up, his eyes tired but determined. "Just finishing up? These numbers from Bradford Industries are fascinating." Monique pulled up a chair, her curiosity piqued. "Oh, what's caught your attention?" "Well," Aaron began, excitement creeping into his voice, "their financials are solid, but there's so much untapped potential. If they just open their eyes to new markets and diverse perspectives, they could really soar." As Aaron spoke, memories of his childhood flashed through his mind. Growing up in a low-income neighborhood, he'd faced countless obstacles. Teachers who underestimated him, potential employers who passed him over, and a system that seemed stacked against him at every turn. But Aaron had persevered. With unwavering determination and the support of his community, he'd worked his way through college, earning a degree in finance. Each step of the way, he'd encountered racism, sometimes blatant, often subtle, but he refused to let it define him. Monique listened intently, her own experiences mirroring his in many ways. They'd met in college, bonding over shared struggles and dreams. Together, they'd built a life and a business empire, supporting each other through every challenge. "You know," Monique said thoughtfully, "investing in Bradford Industries could be a real opportunity, not just financially, but to make a difference." Aaron nodded, a spark in his eyes. "Exactly. With our stake, we could push for real change from the inside." "But Aaron," Monique cautioned, her brow furrowing, "you know how these old money companies can be. Are you prepared for the pushback we might face?" Aaron reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I know it won't be easy, but think of the doors we could open, not just for ourselves, but for others who look like us." Monique squeezed his hand, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You're right, and we've never backed down from a challenge before." As the sun set outside their window, Aaron and Monique continued to discuss their plans. They'd worked hard to build their wealth, always staying under the radar. This investment would thrust them into the spotlight, but they both felt it was time to step up and make their voices heard. "So," Aaron said, leaning back in his chair, "how do you think we should approach this? We could go in guns blazing, demanding change from day one." Monique shook her head, her expression thoughtful. "No, I think we need to be strategic. Let's observe first, get a feel for the company culture. Then we can decide how best to use our influence." Aaron nodded, admiring his wife's wisdom. "You're right, as usual. We'll start small, maybe attend a few meetings incognito, get a real sense of what we're dealing with." As they continued to plan, Aaron couldn't help but reflect on the long journey that had brought them to this point. He remembered the countless nights spent studying, the odd jobs he'd worked to make ends meet, and the constant struggle to be taken seriously in a world that often judged him by the color of his skin. But through it all, Monique had been his rock. She believed in him when others doubted, pushed him when he felt like giving up, and celebrated every small victory along the way. Together, they'd built something remarkable, a testament to their resilience and determination. "You know," Aaron said softly, "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Monique smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "We did this together, Aaron, and we'll face whatever comes next the same way." As night fell, they finalized their plan. They would make a substantial investment in Bradford Industries, but keep their identities hidden for now. It was a risk, but one they felt compelled to take. "To new beginnings," Aaron said, raising his coffee mug in a mock toast. Monique clinked her mug against his. "And to changing the world, one boardroom at a time." The next morning, back at Bradford Industries, Jonathan Bradford strode into his office, his personal assistant trailing behind him with a stack of reports. "Sir," the assistant said hesitantly, "there's been some interest from a new potential investor. They're looking to make a significant contribution." Bradford barely glanced up from his desk. "Nay, they're keeping that confidential for now, sir." Bradford's eyes narrowed. "Confidential? Who do they think they are?" "I don't like mysteries, Sarah. Find out who's behind this." As Sarah scurried out, Bradford turned to gaze out his office window, overlooking the city skyline. He'd built this company from the ground up, molding it in his image. The thought of an unknown entity buying their way in made him uneasy. Little did he know, the winds of change were about to blow through the halls of Bradford Industries. Aaron and Monique Johnson were poised to challenge everything Jonathan Bradford thought he knew about power, success, and the true value of diversity. The bustling offices of Bradford Industries hummed with activity as employees hurried about their day. On the surface, it appeared to be a typical corporate environment, but a closer look revealed undercurrents of subtle racism that permeated the company culture. In a crowded conference room, Maria Rodriguez, a talented marketing manager, leaned forward eagerly as she presented her latest campaign ideas. Her voice was confident, her slides well-prepared, but as she spoke, she couldn't help but notice the glazed expressions of her predominantly white colleagues. "So, in conclusion," Maria said, wrapping up her presentation, "this strategy could help us tap into a whole new demographic and increase our market share by at least 15%. There was a moment of awkward silence before Brad Thompson, a senior executive, cleared his throat. "Thanks, Maria. That was interesting. Now, John, didn't you have some thoughts on our traditional markets?" Maria's face fell as she watched her colleagues perk up, giving their full attention to John's rehashed ideas about targeting their usual customer base. As the meeting continued, her suggestions were quietly sidelined, a pattern she had grown frustratingly familiar with over her years at the company. Later that day, in the HR department, Marcus Turner, a promising young employee, sat across from Linda, the HR manager. His hopes were high as he inquired about the recent management position he had applied for. Linda shuffled some papers, avoiding eye contact. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kus. We went with someone else for the position. We felt they were a better fit for the company culture." Marcus's heart sank. He knew his qualifications were impeccable, his performance reviews stellar. The unspoken message was clear. He didn't fit the mold of what Bradford Industries considered management material. "I understand," he said quietly, masking his disappointment. "Is there any feedback you can give me for future opportunities?" Linda offered a tight smile. "Just keep doing what you're doing. Your time will come." As Marcus left the office, He couldn't help but notice the photo of the management team on the wall, a sea of white faces staring back at him. Meanwhile, in the executive suites, Jonathan Bradford paced his office, his face etched with annoyance. Sarah, his assistant, stood nervously, clutching a folder. Diversity initiatives? Bradford scoffed, glaring at the proposal in Sarah's hands. What's next? Mandatory yoga sessions and free kale smoothies? Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Sir, many companies are finding that diverse teams lead to increased innovation and profitability. Bradford waved his hand dismissively. That's all well and good for tech startups and hipster coffee shops. But this is Bradford Industries. We've done things our way for decades, and we've done just fine. He turned to gaze out the window, his tone becoming serious. Listen, Sarah, I built this company with blood, sweat, and tears. I know what works. All these trendy inclusivity programs, they're just distractions. We need to focus on what's important, making money and keeping our shareholders happy. Sarah nodded silently, knowing better than to argue. As she turned to leave, Bradford called out, "Oh, and Sarah? Find out who's behind that anonymous investment offer. I don't like surprises." Down in the company cafeteria, a group of white executives huddled around a table, their voices low but animated. Among them was Brad Thompson, fresh from the marketing meeting. "Did you see Maria's presentation?" Brad chuckled, shaking his head. "I mean, I'm sure the urban market is great and all, but that's not who we are." Another executive, Tom, nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Bradford's built this company on solid, traditional values. We can't start changing things just to appease every minority group out there." A younger executive, Mike, looked uncomfortable. "I don't know, guys. Maybe we should at least consider some of these new ideas. The world is changing after all." The group fell silent, staring at Mike with a mixture of surprise and disapproval. Brad leaned in, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. "Listen, Mike, you're new here, so let me give you some advice. Bradford knows what he's doing. Our investors trust his judgment. If you want to get ahead in this company, you do well to fall in line." Mike nodded slowly, the unspoken threat clear in Brad's words. As the day wore on, these subtle instances of racism and resistance to change played out across the company. In the design department, Aisha's innovative product concepts were repeatedly passed over in favor of more traditional designs. In IT, Raj found himself consistently assigned to maintenance tasks while his white colleagues were given exciting new projects. Each incident on its own might have seemed small or coincidental, but together, they painted a clear picture of a company culture deeply rooted in outdated prejudices and resistant to change. Late in the afternoon, Bradford called a meeting with his top executives and major investors. As they filed into the plush boardroom, the air was thick with a sense of shared privilege and unspoken understanding. Bradford stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding attention. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice firm, "I've called you here because there are some concerning trends we need to address." He clicked a button, and a graph appeared on the large screen behind him. "Our market share in certain demographics has been slipping. Some of our younger employees seem to think we need to diversify our approach." A murmur of discontent rippled through the room. Bradford held up his hand, silencing them. "Now, I know what you're thinking, and I want to assure you, I have no intention of letting Bradford Industries stray from the path that's made us successful." Richard Whitmore, one of the oldest and wealthiest investors, spoke up. "Good to hear, Jonathan. We can't let this political correctness nonsense infect our business practices." Bradford nodded appreciatively. "Exactly, Richard. We know our customer base. We know what works. All this talk of diversity and inclusion, it's just noise." Another investor, Charles Bennington, leaned forward. "What about that new investment offer? Any word on who's behind it?" Bradford's jaw tightened. "Not yet. But rest assured, whoever it is, they'll need to understand how we do things here if they want a seat at this table." As the meeting continued, the group discussed strategies for maintaining their traditional approach while paying lip service to modern expectations. Ideas were floated about token diversity hires and superficial inclusion programs. Anything to keep up appearances without actually changing the status quo. Throughout the discussion, A few of the younger board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. They could see the writing on the wall. The world was changing, and Bradford Industries was at risk of being left behind. But in the face of Bradford's unwavering confidence and the support of powerful investors, they remained silent. As the meeting drew to a close, Bradford stood once again, his expression serious. "Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your continued support and trust. Together, we've built Bradford Industries into a powerhouse. And together, we'll ensure it stays that way, regardless of what outside pressures we may face." The room erupted in applause, the sound of self-congratulation drowning out any lingering doubts. As the executives and investors filed out, patting each other on the back and making dinner plans, the die was cast. Bradford Industries would resist change at all costs, unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. Meanwhile, across town, Aaron and Monique Johnson were preparing for their first undercover visit to the company. As they dressed in business attire, they discussed their strategy. "Remember," Monique said, adjusting Aaron's tie, "we're just observing today. No matter what we see or hear, we can't give ourselves away." Aaron nodded, his expression determined. "I know, but I have a feeling it's going to be harder than we thought. From what I've heard, Bradford's got his hooks deep into this company's culture." Monique squeezed his hand reassuringly. "That's why we're doing this, honey. Someone needs to shake things up. Might as well be us." As they left their apartment, neither Aaron nor Monique could have fully anticipated the deeply ingrained prejudices they were about to encounter. The subtle racism that permeated Bradford Industries wasn't just a matter of a few bad apples or outdated policies. It was woven into the very fabric of the company, from the top down. As Aaron and Monique stepped into the gleaming lobby of Bradford Industries, they exchanged a knowing glance. The real work was about to begin. They were ready to challenge the status quo, to push for change from within. But first, they needed to understand exactly what they were up against. Aaron and Monique were posing as consultants brought in to assess company operations. They had arranged this through careful maneuvering and a few well-placed calls, ensuring they would have access to high-level meetings without revealing their true identities. As they sat in on a marketing strategy session, the tension in the room was palpable. Maria Rodriguez, the woman they had overheard the day before, was once again presenting her ideas for expanding into new markets. "As I was saying yesterday," Maria began, her voice steady despite the clear frustration in her eyes, "there's a huge, untapped potential in these emerging markets. Our research shows—" Yes, we heard all this yesterday," Brad Thompson interrupted, not bothering to hide his annoyance. "And as I said then, we need to focus on our core demographic. That's where the real money is." Aaron, unable to stay silent, spoke up. "If I may, I'd be interested in hearing more about these emerging markets. In my experience, diversifying your customer base can lead to significant growth." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Aaron. Brad Thompson's face darkened with annoyance at the interruption. "And you are?" he asked, his tone barely civil. "Aaron Johnson. My wife Monique and I are consultants brought in to assess company operations," Aaron replied smoothly. Brad's expression shifted slightly, a hint of interest replacing his initial dismissal. "I see. Well, Mr. Johnson, while we appreciate fresh perspectives, I assure you we know our business best. Bradford Industries has a long history of success, and we didn't achieve that by chasing every new trend." Monique leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson, innovation isn't a trend. It's a necessity in today's rapidly changing market. Perhaps it would be beneficial to hear Ms. Rodriguez out." Maria shot Monique a grateful look before continuing her presentation. As she spoke, Aaron and Monique asked insightful questions, drawing out the full potential of her ideas. By the end, even some of the more skeptical team members were showing interest. But Brad Thompson remained unconvinced. As the meeting concluded, he approached Aaron and Monique, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, but I think you'll find that Bradford Industries has its own way of doing things. We're not some Silicon Valley startup chasing the latest fads." As Brad walked away, Monique turned to Aaron, her voice low. Did you see how quickly they dismissed Maria's ideas until we spoke up? And even then, Brad was resistant. Aaron nodded as Joss said, I saw, but I also saw the looks on some of the other team members' faces. They're starting to question the status quo. That's a start. Throughout the day, Aaron and Monique attended various meetings and department briefings. In each one, they witnessed similar patterns of subtle discrimination and resistance to new ideas, particularly those coming from employees of color. In an IT strategy session, they watched as Raj, a brilliant programmer, was repeatedly talked over and his suggestions ignored. In finance, they saw how Aisha's innovative cost-saving measures were dismissed without proper consideration. Each time, Aaron and Monique carefully interjected, lending their support to these undervalued voices. And each time, they faced pushback from the established leadership. By the end of the day, they were emotionally drained but more determined than ever. As they debriefed in a quiet corner of the building's cafeteria, Monique voiced her concerns. Aaron, I'm worried. The level of ingrained bias here, it's not just Bradford. It's spread throughout the entire company culture. When we reveal ourselves as investors, the backlash could be severe. Aaron reached across the table, taking Monique's hand in his. I know, honey, but that's exactly why we need to do this. Bradford Industries has the potential to be a leader in their industry. With our influence, we can push for real, meaningful change. Monique squeezed his hand, a small smile breaking through her concern. You're right. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. So, what's our next move? Before Aaron could respond, they overheard a conversation from a nearby table. Two executives were discussing the upcoming investor meeting. Did you hear about this mystery investor? One asked. Apparently, they bought a significant stake in the company. Yeah, the other replied, lowering his voice. Bradford's in a tizzy about it. He hates not knowing who he's dealing with. Aaron and Monique exchanged a look, a mix of anticipation and apprehension in their eyes. The stage was set for their big reveal, but the reaction was far from certain. As they left Bradford Industries that evening, they were acutely aware of the challenge that lay ahead. They had witnessed firsthand the deep-seated biases and resistance to change that permeated the company. But they had also seen glimmers of hope, employees with fresh ideas and open minds, eager for a chance to be heard. We can do this, Aaron said as they walked to their car. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But we can make a difference here. Monique nodded, her determination matching his. You're right. Bradford Industries needs a wake-up call, and we're just the ones to deliver it. As they drove home, they began to formulate their strategy for the upcoming investor meeting. They knew that revealing themselves would be a shock to Bradford and his old guard. But they also knew that shock might be exactly what was needed to shake up the status quo. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Aaron and Monique pored over company reports, market analyses, and employee data. They crafted a comprehensive plan for steering Bradford Industries towards a more inclusive and innovative future. On the morning of the investor meeting, they stood in front of their mirror, adjusting each other's attire one last time. Ready for this? Aaron asked, meeting Monique's eyes in the reflection. Monique took a deep breath, then smiled. Ready as I'll ever be. Let's go make some waves. As they headed out, they knew they were walking into a storm. But they also knew that sometimes a storm was exactly what was needed to clear the air and make way for something new and better. Little did Jonathan Bradford know, but the anonymous investors he had been so wary of were about to turn his world upside down. The winds of change were blowing, and Bradford Industries would never be the same again. The morning of the big investor meeting dawned bright and clear, but inside Bradford Industries, tension hung thick in the air. Jonathan Bradford paced his office, his normally confident demeanor tinged with anxiety. The mysterious new investor who had acquired a significant stake in the company was set to be revealed today, and Bradford hated surprises. Sarah, he barked, summoning his assistant. Is everything ready for the meeting? Sarah hurried in, clutching a tablet. Yes, Mr. Bradford. The conference room is prepared, refreshments are ordered, and all the other investors have confirmed their attendance. Bradford nodded tersely. Good. And any word on our mystery guest? Sarah shook her head. Nothing concrete, sir. But rumors are flying. Some say it's a tech mogul looking to diversify. Others think it might be a foreign investment group. Bradford's frown deepened. Well, whoever it is, they'll need to understand how we do things here. Bradford Industries isn't changing for anyone. As the morning wore on, the company's top executives and board members began to arrive. The atmosphere was one of nervous excitement. In the large conference room, last-minute preparations were underway. Sleek presentations were queued up on the massive screen, showing off the company's impressive financial performance and future projections. Bradford stood at the head of the long mahogany table, greeting each arrival with a firm handshake and a practiced smile. "Richard, good to see you," he said warmly to one of the oldest investors. "Charles, looking well as always," to another. The room gradually filled with men in expensive suits, their chatter a mix of golf scores and stock prices. Bradford's confidence grew with each familiar face. These were his people, the old guard of the business world. Whatever young upstart had bought into the company, they'd soon learn the pecking order. Meanwhile, in the lobby, Aaron and Monique Johnson stepped through the revolving doors, their hearts racing with anticipation. They were dressed impeccably, Aaron in a crisp charcoal suit, Monique in a tailored navy pantsuit. They looked every inch the powerful investors they were. Yet as they approached the reception desk, they were met with the same dismissive attitude they'd encountered on their previous visits. The receptionist, the same blonde woman from before, barely glanced up from her computer. "May I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she'd rather not. "Yes," Aaron replied calmly. "We're here for the investor meeting." The receptionist's eyebrows rose skeptically. "The investor meeting? I think you must be mistaken. That's a closed meeting for major shareholders only." Monique stepped forward, her voice level but firm. "We're quite aware of what the meeting is for." Aaron and Monique Johnson. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, I see. My apologies. Please go right in." The meeting is in the main conference room on the top floor. As they walked toward the elevators, Monique squeezed Aaron's hand. "Ready for this?" she whispered. Aaron nodded, his expression determined. "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, no matter what happens in there, we're doing this for all the Maria Rodriguez's and Raj Patel's who deserve a fair shot." The elevator ride to the top floor seemed to take an eternity. When the doors finally opened, they were met with the bustling sounds of the ongoing meeting. Taking a deep breath, they stepped into the conference room. The scene that greeted them was exactly as they had imagined. Jonathan Bradford stood at the head of the table, mid-conversation with a group of older white men. The room was a sea of gray hair and pale faces, with hardly a person of color in sight. For a moment, no one seemed to notice their entrance. Aaron and Monique exchanged a glance. Then Aaron cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "I believe we're expected." The chatter died down as all eyes turned to the newcomers. Bradford's smile faltered for a moment before he recovered, making his way around the table. "Ah, yes," he said, his tone uncertain. "You must be—" "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your names." "Aaron and Monique Johnson," Aaron replied, extending his hand. Bradford's eyes narrowed slightly, darting between Aaron and Monique. His gaze lingered on their faces, then their attire, as if trying to place them. "Johnson? Johnson? I'm not familiar with your firm. Which company did you say you were with?" Aaron's smile didn't waver. "We're not with a firm, Mr. Bradford. We're individual investors." Bradford's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then something darker. He looked at Aaron's still extended hand, then back at his face. In that moment, Bradford made a decision that would change the course of Bradford Industries forever. Instead of taking Aaron's hand, he turned slightly, addressing the room at large. "Well, let's get this meeting started, shall we? I'm sure we all have busy schedules." The dismissal was clear. Aaron's hand hung in the air for a moment before he slowly lowered it. Monique's sharp intake of breath was audible in the suddenly silent room. Bradford moved back toward his seat, muttering under his breath, "Probably some diversity, higher quota nonsense." The words were quiet, but in the tense atmosphere, they carried. Aaron's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. Monique, however, couldn't hide the hurt and anger that flashed across her face. As Bradford reached his chair, One of the board members, an older gentleman named Walter Hayes, leaned in close. "Jonathan," he whispered urgently, "do you realize who they are? The Johnsons are the ones who bought the controlling stake. They're our biggest investors now." The color drained from Bradford's face as the magnitude of his mistake hit him. As the tension in the conference room reached its peak, Aaron Johnson's mind drifted back to his childhood. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Detroit, he had learned early on that the world wasn't always fair, especially for a young black man with big dreams. He remembered his father, a factory worker, coming home exhausted but never defeated. "Son," he'd say, "the world might not always give you a fair shake, but that's no excuse not to give it your all." Those words had become Aaron's mantra, pushing him through countless challenges. Now, standing in the Bradford Industries conference room, facing the very embodiment of the prejudice they'd fought against their entire lives, Aaron felt a sense of calm determination. He looked at Monique, saw the strength and resolve in her eyes, and knew that they were exactly where they needed to be. As Aaron's mind returned to the present, he found Jonathan Bradford staring at him, a mix of fear and desperation in the older man's eyes. The room was still thick with tension, the other board members and investors shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Bradford cleared his throat, his usual confidence notably absent. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," he began, his voice strained, I owe you an apology. My behavior earlier was inexcusable. I hope you can forgive a foolish old man's mistake." He extended his hand towards Aaron, a forced smile on his face. But Aaron made no move to accept it. Instead, he regarded Bradford coolly, allowing the weight of the moment to sink in. "Mr. Bradford," Aaron said finally, his voice calm but firm, "an apology is a start, but it's not enough. What happened here today isn't just about you and me. It's about a systemic problem that runs through the very veins of this company." Bradford's hand slowly lowered, his smile fading. "Now, see here," he started, some of his old bluster returning. "Bradford Industries has been successful for decades. Our methods—" "Your methods," Monique interjected, "are outdated and harmful, not just to your employees, but to your bottom line. You're leaving talent and opportunities on the table because of narrow-minded thinking." Aaron nodded, picking up where Monique left off. "This company has potential, Mr. Bradford. That's why we invested in it. But that potential is being squandered by a culture of exclusion and bias." He turned to address the entire room. "Gentlemen, let me be clear. Diversity isn't just a buzzword or a quota to be filled. It's a strength. It brings new perspectives, new ideas, and opens up new markets. Companies that embrace diversity and inclusion aren't just doing the right thing morally. They're setting themselves up for success in a global economy." The room was silent, all eyes fixed on Aaron. Even those who had initially seemed skeptical were listening intently. "I've spent my entire life navigating spaces that weren't designed for people who look like me," Aaron continued. "I've faced dismissal, disrespect, and outright hostility. But I've also seen what's possible when people from different backgrounds come together, when everyone's voice is heard and valued." Monique stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with her husband. "Aaron and I didn't invest in this company to make a quick profit or to push anyone out. We invested because we see the potential for Bradford Industries to be a leader, not just in technology, but in creating a truly inclusive and innovative corporate culture." Bradford, who had been listening with a mix of shock and growing panic, suddenly burst out. "But what does this mean for the company? For me? Are you planning to oust the current leadership?" Aaron turned back to Bradford, his expression stern but not unkind. "Mr. Bradford, that depends entirely on you and the rest of the board. We're not here to take over or to force anyone out. We're here to institute necessary changes. The question is, are you willing to be part of that change?" Bradford's face paled. "Changes? What kind of changes?" "For starters," Monique said, "a comprehensive review of your hiring and promotion practices. We want to see a clear path for talented employees of all backgrounds to advance within the company." Aaron nodded. "We'll also be looking at your product development pipeline. Are you considering diverse perspectives in your design and marketing processes? Are you exploring markets that you might be overlooking due to unconscious biases?" Bradford sputtered. But that could take years. It could completely upend how we do business. Exactly, Aaron said firmly. Mr. Bradford, the world is changing. Companies that don't adapt will be left behind. We're offering Bradford Industries a chance to be at the forefront of that change. Bradford slumped in his chair, the fight seeming to go out of him. And if I refuse? If the board refuses? Aaron's expression was unyielding. As majority shareholders, we have the power to make these changes with or without your cooperation. But I hope it doesn't come to that. Change is always easier when everyone is on board. A tense silence fell over the room. The other board members exchanged nervous glances, the implications of Aaron's words sinking in. Bradford looked like a man watching his world crumble around him. Finally, Walter Hayes, the board member who had earlier pointed out Bradford's mistake, spoke up. I think, he said slowly, that we would be foolish not to at least consider what Mr. and Mrs. Johnson are proposing. The business landscape is indeed changing, and Bradford Industries needs to change with it if we want to remain competitive. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Bradford looked around desperately, but it was clear he was losing support by the minute. Now, wait just a minute, Bradford said, a note of panic in his voice. Surely we can come to some sort of compromise. Mr. Johnson, what if we set up a diversity committee? Or maybe we could make a sizable donation to a charity of your choice. Aaron shook his head. Mr. Bradford, this isn't about appeasing us or checking a box. This is about fundamental change in how this company operates. It's about creating an environment where incidents like what happened today never occur again, where every employee feels valued and heard, and where innovation can flourish without being stifled by outdated biases. Bradford's shoulders sagged in defeat. So what happens now? He asked, his voice small. Aaron looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each board member in turn. Now we get to work. We'll need full cooperation and transparency from everyone in this room. We'll be bringing in external consultants to assess the current state of the company and to help implement necessary changes. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but I promise you, it will be worth it. He turned back to Bradford. Mr. Bradford, you built this company from the ground up. You have valuable experience and knowledge. If you're willing to open your mind and be part of this transformation, there's still a place for you here. But if you can't adapt, if you can't embrace this new direction, then it might be time to consider stepping aside. Bradford nodded slowly, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. I understand. I'll need some time to think. Of course, Aaron said. Take the time you need. But understand that with or without you, changes will be happening at Bradford Industries. As the meeting adjourned, the atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. Where there had once been condescension and dismissal towards Aaron and Monique, there was now a mix of respect, curiosity, and in some cases, apprehension about the changes to come. As the board members filed out, many paused to shake hands with Aaron and Monique, some even offering tentative words of support for their vision. Bradford was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at the couple who had so thoroughly upended his world. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, he said, his voice heavy with a mix of emotions. I hope you can forgive an old man's foolishness. I see now that I have a lot to learn. Aaron nodded, his expression softening slightly. There's always time to learn, Mr. Bradford. The question is whether you're willing to do so. As Bradford left, Aaron turned to Monique, letting out a long breath. Well, he said, a small smile playing at his lips. That was quite a first day as majority shareholders. Monique laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. Just another day at the office, right? Fighting systemic racism and changing corporate culture before lunch. Aaron pulled her into a hug, drawing strength from her presence as he had so many times before. We did it, he whispered. This is just the beginning, but we did it. As they stood there, in the now empty conference room of a company they were poised to transform, Aaron and Monique felt the weight of the moment. They had faced down prejudice and dismissal, just as they had so many times in their lives. But this time, they had the power to do more than just persevere. They had the power to create real, lasting change. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with resistance and setbacks. But as they looked at each other, they knew they were ready. Together, They would transform Bradford Industries, and in doing so, they hoped to set an example for the entire corporate world. The winds of change were blowing, and Aaron and Monique Johnson were at the helm, steering towards a more inclusive and innovative future. In the weeks following the dramatic board meeting, Bradford Industries was abuzz with activity and tension. The news of Aaron and Monique Johnson's majority stake and their plans for sweeping changes had spread like wildfire throughout the company. For many employees, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds, there was a palpable sense of hope and excitement. For others, especially those who had long benefited from the old system, there was anxiety and resistance. Jonathan Bradford found himself caught in the middle of this storm of change, struggling to adapt to the new reality. Despite his initial words of contrition, old habits died hard. He often caught himself falling back into familiar patterns of thought and behavior, much to the frustration of Aaron and Monique. One morning, about a month after the fateful board meeting, Bradford sat in his office, staring out the window at the city skyline. The view that had once filled him with pride now seemed to mock him, a reminder of how quickly things could change. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. "Come in," he called, turning to see his assistant, Sarah, enter with a stack of papers. "Mr. Bradford," she said, her tone cautious, "I have the diversity and inclusion reports that Mr. and Mrs. Johnson requested. They're expecting them at the meeting this afternoon." Bradford's jaw tightened. "Right," he muttered, taking the papers. "The meeting. Another chance for them to tell me how to run my company." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, if I may, the Johnsons have been making some positive changes. Morale is up in several departments, and we've seen an uptick in innovative ideas coming from teams that were previously overlooked." Bradford waved his hand dismissively. "Innovation? Bah! We were plenty innovative before they came along. This is all just disruption for disruption's sake." As Sarah left, closing the door behind her, Bradford thumbed through the reports. The pages were filled with statistics and recommendations that made his head spin. Diversity targets, inclusion initiatives, unconscious bias training. It all seemed so foreign to the way he'd always done business. Meanwhile, in another part of the building, Aaron and Monique were meeting with Maria Rodriguez, who had recently been promoted to head of the newly formed Innovation and Diversity Outreach Department. "The response has been overwhelming," Maria was saying, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "We've received so many ideas from employees who previously felt their voices weren't heard. And our new mentorship program is already showing promising results." Aaron nodded, a smile playing at his lips. "That's excellent news, Maria. You've done an outstanding job getting these initiatives off the ground." Monique leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Have you encountered any resistance? We know change can be difficult, especially in a company with such an entrenched culture." Maria's smile faltered slightly. "There has been some pushback, particularly from some of the older executives. And Mr. Bradford, well, he's been less than enthusiastic about some of our proposals." Aaron and Monique exchanged a glance. They had hoped Bradford would come around, that he would see the benefits of the changes they were implementing. But it was becoming increasingly clear that the old CEO was struggling to let go of his outdated mindset. As the afternoon meeting approached, tension built throughout the company. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering about the rumored clash between the old guard and the new investors. Some took bets on whether Bradford would finally embrace the changes or if he would make a final stand against the new direction of the company. In the conference room, Aaron and Monique sat at the head of the table, a reversal of positions from their first meeting. As the board members filed in, the couple could feel the nervous energy in the room. Bradford was the last to enter, his face set in a grim expression. "Thank you all for coming," Aaron began once everyone was seated. "We've made significant progress over the past month, but there's still much work to be done. We'll start with a report from Maria on the new initiatives, then move on to Dash." "Enough!" Bradford suddenly burst out, slamming his hand on the table. All eyes turned to him in shock. "I've sat by and watched you dismantle everything I've built, but I can't do it anymore." Aaron tried to maintain his calm demeanor. "Mr. Bradford, no one is dismantling anything. We're improving, adapting to Dash." "Improving?" Bradford scoffed. "You call this improving? We're wasting time and resources on feel-good initiatives while our competitors are leaving us in the dust. This company thrived for decades under my leadership, and now you're throwing it all away for some misguided notion of inclusivity. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Monique leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. Mr. Bradford, I understand this is difficult for you. Change always is, but the numbers don't lie. Our new initiatives are already showing positive results. Employee satisfaction is up, we're seeing an increase in innovative ideas, and our market share in previously untapped demographics is growing. Bradford shook his head vehemently. Numbers can be manipulated. This is all just smoke and mirrors. You're running my company into the ground, and I won't stand for it any longer. Aaron's expression hardened. Your company, Mr. Bradford? I think you're forgetting who the majority shareholders are now. We've tried to work with you, to bring you along on this journey of transformation. But if you can't adapt, if you can't see the value in what we're doing, then maybe it's time for you to step aside. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Bradford looked around the room, seeking support from the board members he'd worked with for years. But he found only averted gazes and uncomfortable silence. In that moment, he realized he was alone. Fine, Bradford said, his voice low and bitter. If this is how it's going to be, I'll resign. But mark my words, you'll regret this. This company will crumble without me. With that, Bradford stormed out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Aaron and Monique exchanged a look of mixed relief and concern. They had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but they also knew that Bradford's resistance was holding the company back from reaching its full potential. As news of Bradford's resignation spread through the company, reactions were mixed. Some employees, particularly those who had benefited from the old system, were worried about what the future might hold. Others, especially those who had felt marginalized under Bradford's leadership, felt a sense of liberation and hope. In the days that followed, Aaron and Monique worked tirelessly to steady the ship. They held town hall meetings with employees, assuring them that while change was coming, it was change for the better. They met with clients and partners, reaffirming Bradford Industries' commitment to excellence while also outlining their vision for a more inclusive and innovative future. One afternoon, about a week after Bradford's dramatic exit, Aaron found himself in the former CEO's office. As he looked around at the dark wood paneling and the photos of Bradford with various dignitaries, he couldn't help but feel the weight of history. But he also felt a sense of possibility, of the potential for something new and better. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Jamal Foster, the young employee who had been passed over for promotion under Bradford's leadership. Mr. Johnson, Jamal said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Do you have a moment? Of course, Jamal, Aaron replied warmly. Come in, and please call me Aaron. Jamal entered, fidgeting slightly. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you and Mrs. Johnson are doing. It's like a weight has been lifted off this place. People are excited to come to work, to share their ideas. It's amazing. Aaron smiled, genuinely touched. Thank you, Jamal. That means a lot. But remember, this isn't just about what Monique and I are doing. It's about creating an environment where everyone can contribute, where everyone's voice is heard. You're as much a part of this transformation as we are. As Jamal left, his step noticeably lighter, Aaron felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, there were challenges ahead. Yes, there would be resistance and setbacks. But moments like this, seeing the positive impact their actions were having on individual lives, made it all worthwhile. Over the next few months, Bradford Industries underwent a remarkable transformation. The company's product line expanded, incorporating ideas that had previously been overlooked or dismissed. Marketing campaigns became more inclusive, reaching out to demographics that had long been ignored. The workforce grew more diverse, bringing in fresh perspectives and talents. One day, as Aaron and Monique were walking through the research and development department, they overheard an excited conversation between two employees. One a young woman in a hijab, the other an older man with a thick southern accent. I'm telling you, Aisha, the man was saying, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. Your idea for the new interface is brilliant. It's going to revolutionize how we approach accessibility in our products. Aisha beamed, her own excitement palpable. Thanks, Bob. I never thought I'd see the day when my ideas would be taken seriously here. And your suggestions for the hardware integration? Genius. As Aaron and Monique passed by, exchanging a smile, they knew they were witnessing the fruits of their labor. This was what true innovation looked like: diverse minds coming together, building on each other's strengths, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. But not everything was smooth sailing. Despite the company's growing success, there were still pockets of resistance. Some longtime employees, set in their ways, struggled to adapt to the new culture. There were occasional clashes, misunderstandings born from years of ingrained biases. Aaron and Monique knew that true change took time. They implemented ongoing training programs, encouraged open dialogues, and worked to create a culture where mistakes were seen as opportunities for growth rather than cause for punishment. One particularly challenging moment came when a group of employees, led by Brad Thompson, the executive who had been so dismissive of Maria's ideas, threatened to leave the company en masse. "This isn't the Bradford Industries I signed up for," Brad complained during a tense meeting with Aaron and Monique. "All this focus on diversity and inclusion is distracting us from what really matters, the bottom line." Monique fixed Brad with a steady gaze. "Mr. Thompson, have you looked at our bottom line lately? Our profits are up 20% from last year. Our market share has expanded in 3 new demographics. We've won contracts that were previously out of our reach because of our new, innovative product line. Tell me, how exactly is this distracting us from what matters?" Brad sputtered, clearly caught off guard. But the way we're doing things now, it's so different. All these new faces, new ideas. It's not how we've always done things." Aaron leaned forward, his tone firm but not unkind. "You're right, Brad. It's not how you've always done things. And that's precisely the point. The world is changing, and we're changing with it. We're not just keeping up, we're leading the way. Now, you can be part of that future, or you can step aside. The choice is yours." In the end, Brad and most of his group chose to stay. Some left, unable or unwilling to adapt. But for every employee who left, there were dozens of talented individuals eager to join a company that was quickly gaining a reputation as a leader in both technology and corporate culture. As the months turned into a year, Bradford Industries' success became impossible to ignore. Industry publications that had once dismissed the company's new direction as a misguided social experiment were now hailing it as a model for the future of corporate America. The company's stock price soared, and its products were in higher demand than ever. One sunny afternoon, Aaron and Monique stood in the atrium of the Bradford Industries headquarters, watching employees mill about during their lunch break. The space, once a staid and formal area, had been transformed into a vibrant community hub. There were collaborative workspaces, a diverse array of food options, and even a small art gallery featuring works by local artists from underrepresented communities. "You know," Monique said, leaning into Aaron's shoulder, "sometimes I still can't believe we did it. That we're here." Aaron nodded, his arm around his wife's waist. "I know what you mean. It's been a long road." As they stood there, they overheard snippets of conversations around them. Engineers discussing groundbreaking new designs. Marketing teams brainstorming campaigns that would resonate with a diverse global audience. HR representatives excitedly planning the next round of community outreach programs. This was the Bradford Industries they had envisioned: dynamic, inclusive, innovative. A place where people from all walks of life could come together, share their unique perspectives, and create something truly extraordinary. But even as they basked in the success of their vision, Aaron and Monique knew their work was far from over. There were always new challenges to face, new horizons to explore. They had transformed one company, but there was an entire corporate world out there still clinging to outdated modes of thinking. As if reading his thoughts, Monique squeezed Aaron's hand. "So, what's next for us?" Aaron grinned, a familiar spark of excitement in his eyes. "Well, I've been thinking, Bradford Industries isn't the only company out there that could use a shakeup. What if we started looking at other investment opportunities, other chances to drive change on a larger scale?" Monique's eyes lit up. A whole portfolio of companies, all working towards a more inclusive and innovative future. "I like the sound of that. As they began to discuss their plans, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A familiar figure had just walked through the doors, Jonathan Bradford himself. The former CEO stood in the atrium, looking around in clear disbelief. The company he had built, that he had been so sure would crumble without him, was thriving beyond his wildest dreams. Employees moved past him, some nodding politely, others ignoring him entirely. He was a relic of the past in this new, vibrant environment. Aaron and Monique exchanged a glance, then made their way over to Bradford. As they approached, they could see the conflicting emotions playing across his face: anger, regret, and perhaps a hint of grudging admiration. "Mr. Bradford," Aaron said, extending his hand. "This is a surprise." Bradford hesitated for a moment before shaking Aaron's hand. "Mr. Johnson." "Mrs. Johnson." I had to see it for myself. I've been hearing things, reading about the company's success. I didn't want to believe it." Monique's voice was gentle but firm. "Believe it, Mr. Bradford. This is what happens when you tap into the full potential of your workforce. When you create an environment where everyone can thrive." Bradford nodded slowly, his eyes taking in the bustling atrium. "I see that now. I was wrong about a lot of things." The admission clearly cost him, but there was a sense of release in his voice, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Aaron placed a hand on Bradford's shoulder. "It takes a big person to admit when they're wrong, Mr. Bradford. Thank you for that. Would you like a tour? See all the changes we've made?" Bradford hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that, yes." As they led Bradford through the transformed company, explaining the new initiatives and introducing him to key team members, Aaron and Monique could see the old man's perspective shifting. He asked thoughtful questions, nodded approvingly at innovative solutions, and even cracked a smile when Jamal Foster enthusiastically explained a new project he was leading. By the end of the tour, Bradford's entire demeanor had changed. The bitterness and resentment seemed to have melted away, replaced by a mix of wistfulness and cautious optimism. "You've done good here," he said finally, as they stood once again in the atrium. "Better than I ever could have. I see that now." Aaron and Monique exchanged a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Bradford," Aaron said. "That means a lot coming from you." As Bradford turned to leave, he paused, looking back at the couple who had so thoroughly upended his world, and in doing so, had elevated his life's work to heights he never could have imagined. "You know," he said, a hint of his old spark returning to his eyes, "I've been thinking. All this talk of diversity and inclusion, well, it got me wondering. There are a lot of small businesses out there, run by folks who look like me, who are struggling to adapt to this new world. Maybe I could help them, share what I've learned, help them avoid the mistakes I made." Monique's face lit up. "Mr. Bradford, that's a wonderful idea. Your experience could be invaluable to those businesses." Bradford nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Well, I suppose you can teach an old dog new tricks after all. Thank you, both of you, for everything." As they watched Bradford leave, Aaron and Monique felt a sense of completion. They had not only transformed a company, but had also, in some small way, transformed a man. It was a powerful reminder of the ripple effects of their work, how change in one place could spread outward in unexpected ways. That evening, as they sat in their home office, planning their next moves, Aaron paused, looking at Monique with a mix of love and admiration. "You know," he said, his voice soft with emotion, "we've come a long way from that little apartment where we first dreamed all this up." Monique smiled, reaching out to take his hand. "We have, but in many ways, we're still those same dreamers, aren't we? Still fighting for what we believe in, still pushing for change." Aaron nodded, squeezing her hand. "You're right. And now we have the means to make an even bigger impact. But I have to ask, are you ready for what comes next? It won't be easy, taking on more companies, facing more resistance." Monique's eyes sparkled with determination. "When has easy ever been our goal? We're changing the world, one boardroom at a time. I'm more than ready." As they continued their planning late into the night, news of Bradford Industries' success was spreading far beyond the company itself. Industry analysts were taking note, and other corporations were starting to pay attention to the dramatic turnaround. One morning, a few weeks later, Aaron and Monique found themselves in the green room of a major news network, preparing for a live interview. The producer, a young woman with a clipboard, poked her head in. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, we're ready for you in 5 minutes." As they followed her to the studio, Aaron felt a flutter of nerves. This wasn't just about Bradford Industries anymore. This interview could be the start of something much bigger. The lights were bright as they took their seats across from the interviewer, a well-known business journalist named David Chun. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," David began as the cameras rolled. "Your work at Bradford Industries has been making waves in the business world. Can you tell us a bit about your approach?" Aaron leaned forward slightly. "Thank you, David. Our approach is simple, really. We believe that diversity and inclusion aren't just moral imperatives. They're good business. When you create an environment where everyone feels valued and heard, where different perspectives are not just tolerated but actively sought out, innovation flourishes." Monique nodded, picking up the thread. "Exactly. Too many companies see diversity initiatives as a checkbox to tick, or worse, as a burden. We see it as an opportunity to tap into new markets, to bring fresh ideas to the table, to create products and services that truly meet the needs of a diverse global population." David looked intrigued. "But surely it's not that simple. You must have faced resistance, especially in a company with such an entrenched culture as Bradford Industries." "Oh, absolutely," Aaron agreed. "Change is never easy, especially when you're challenging long-held beliefs and practices. We faced skepticism, pushback, even outright hostility at times. But we also found allies, people within the company who had long felt undervalued and were eager for change. The key," Monique added, "was to show results. We implemented changes gradually, measured their impact rigorously, and let the numbers speak for themselves. It's hard to argue with improved productivity, increased market share, and rising profits." As the interview continued, Aaron and Monique shared stories from their experience at Bradford Industries. The challenges they'd overcome, the successes they'd achieved, and the lessons they'd learned along the way. They spoke passionately about their vision for a more inclusive corporate America, one that could better serve an increasingly diverse world. As they wrapped up, David asked one final question. "So, what's next for the two of you? Will you be staying on at Bradford Industries, or do you have other plans?" Aaron and Monique exchanged a smile. "While we're immensely proud of what we've accomplished at Bradford Industries, we see it as just the beginning," Aaron said. "We're looking at other investment opportunities, other companies where we believe we can drive positive change." Monique nodded. "Our goal is to create a ripple effect across the corporate landscape, to show that inclusivity and profitability aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, they go hand in hand." As they left the studio after the interview, Aaron and Monique were approached by several people, other guests, network staff, even a few executives who had been watching from the sidelines. All of them wanted to know more, to discuss potential collaborations, to seek advice on implementing similar changes in their own organizations. In the car ride home, as they fielded calls and messages from people who had watched the interview, Monique turned to Aaron with a grin. "I think we might have started something big here." Aaron laughed, shaking his head in wonder. "I think you might be right. You ready for this?" Monique's response was to pull out her tablet, already starting to research their next potential investment. "Always," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Over the next few years, Aaron and Monique's influence spread far beyond Bradford Industries. They invested in a diverse portfolio of companies, always with an eye towards driving change from within. Some were established corporations resistant to change, much like Bradford had been. Others were promising startups led by underrepresented entrepreneurs who needed not just capital, but mentorship and connections. Their approach wasn't always welcomed. They faced lawsuits, smear campaigns, and personal attacks. Some accused them of pushing a woke agenda at the expense of shareholder value. Others claimed they were just in it for the money, using social justice as a marketing ploy. But Aaron and Monique stood firm, letting their results speak for themselves. Company after company under their influence showed improved performance, increased innovation, and better employee satisfaction. They were proving, on a grand scale, that diversity and inclusion were not just ethical imperatives, but key drivers of business success in the 21st century. Their work began to attract attention beyond the business world. They were invited to speak at universities, policy forums, and international conferences. They established a foundation to support education and entrepreneurship in underserved communities. They became vocal advocates for corporate governance reforms and more inclusive economic policies. Through it all, Aaron and Monique remained grounded, never forgetting where they came from or the struggles they had faced. They made a point of mentoring young people from backgrounds similar to their own, opening doors that had once been closed to them. One evening, about 5 years after their transformative work at Bradford Industries, Aaron and Monique found themselves back in their old neighborhood in Detroit. They had just finished speaking at a community center, encouraging local youth to pursue their dreams in business and technology. As they walked hand in hand down the street, memories flooding back, they paused in front of their old apartment building. It was here, in a tiny one-bedroom flat, that they had first dared to dream of changing the corporate world. "Did you ever imagine we'd come this far?" Monique asked, leaning into Aaron's shoulder. Aaron shook his head, a mix of amazement and humility in his voice. "Never in my wildest dreams. But you know what? I have a feeling we're just getting started." As they stood there, a group of young kids rode by on bicycles, laughing and calling out to each other. Aaron and Monique watched them go, seeing in those children the same potential, the same spark that had driven them all those years ago. "Come on," Monique said, tugging gently on Aaron's hand. "We've got work to do." And with that, they turned away from the old apartment building and walked towards their future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had transformed Bradford Industries, shaken up the corporate world, and inspired a new generation of diverse leaders. But their journey was far from over. As they reached their car, Aaron's phone buzzed with a notification. It was an alert about a major tech company facing criticism for its lack of diversity in senior positions. Aaron showed the screen to Monique, raising an eyebrow in question. Monique grinned, already pulling out her tablet to start her research. "Looks like we found our next project," she said. As they drove away, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant hues, Aaron and Monique Johnson were already planning their next move, ready to continue their mission of transforming corporate America, one company at a time. The story of Bradford Industries was just the beginning. Their true legacy was still being written in boardrooms and classrooms, in startups and Fortune 500 companies, wherever old barriers were being broken down and new possibilities were being born. The racist CEO who wouldn't shake a black man's hand had unwittingly set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the face of American business. And Aaron and Monique Johnson were leading the charge, their hands firmly clasped together, their eyes fixed on a more inclusive and innovative future. Aaron's journey of humility and quiet strength led to an extraordinary transformation, not just for himself, but for the company and everyone who hears his story. His dignified response to an act of blatant disrespect, with Monique standing by his side, sparked a wave of change that revealed the true power of respect and standing up for what's right. If Aaron and Monique's story resonated with you, be sure to subscribe for more inspiring stories of resilience and justice. And before you go, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you think you would have handled the situation if you were in Aaron's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below.